Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of My Great Aunt Edna, the leadership show that focuses on excellence, doing things the right way, no shortcuts, and accountability. I'm your host, Mac McNeil, and today our guest is Dr. David Glover. And Dr. Glover is the founding visionary of Ennoblement, LLC, a consulting company for executive coaching and organizational development. He is also the creator of the initiative I Like Me and Spiritual Fine Arts. David's 20-year career background spans nonprofit, religious, and corporate organizations, and has also been a featured international presenter and speaker. He's the author of an award winning book, Building and Maintaining Organizations. And with that, I want to introduce everyone to Dr. Glover. Dr. Glover, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm so honored to be here to make it onto the show. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity to share and to be enlightened at the same time.
Outstanding, and thank you. So I want to jump right into it. So introduce everyone beyond what I just said in the bio. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you've come to be to the point you are in your career.
Okay, I'll give you cliff notes because that's
Uh,
the only way we'll make it. But a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised there, moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 2009. Came here under duress. But it was the best thing that I needed to help my trajectory. Sometimes life helps you govern what you need more than you think you need it, right? So I didn't really know how much change was needed for my blossoming, for me to come into who I am
mhm.
until I came kicking and screaming to Atlanta. And you would think coming from Milwaukee, who wants to really, that change should have been apparent, but it wasn't. I wanted New York. So, but being here, I've been able to matriculate through, education to my master's and doctorate degree, as well as, starting my own business. And, what I'm most excited about is even being here connected me with doors of doing business in South Africa, in
Mhm.
Johannesburg, Botswana, and Cape Town. And so, I'm excited about what things are coming, but it's, that's kind of a short introduction of where I am right now beyond what you've already given them.
Thank you for that elaboration. And we talked a little bit about, that Midwest kind of mindset. I'm right here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so it was all new to me. And then it's a big transition going from the Midwest to the Southeast. So talk to me a little bit about that transition and then, keep it around the lens of leadership. Like what were the differences you noticed between the Midwest and Atlanta, Georgia?
Sure. I think that's a great question, and it's probably one that's not as often thought about. When we talk about leadership in courses and education and all of those things, we kind of put U.S. into Western civilization leadership
Mhm.
versus other countries. But even the sub categories and regions in United States, what I noticed was that from Milwaukee at least, leadership was very upfront about their microaggressions
Mm.
or their stereotypes or it was very, you knew what you were up against from the jump. Like when you walked in,
Mhm.
they, without having an HR case, told you what they believed your
Yeah.
parameters were. Versus when I came down here, I had to adjust to the fact that it was implicit. Like if you didn't know, you was going to know until it was too late.
Mhm.
Like why your trajectory was limited, because it didn't matter how many dinners you had with the big boss, you weren't part of that, that clique, or you didn't look the part, or
Yes.
you didn't walk the walk. And so it became a learned pattern, something that you had to kind of just lean on others to kind of know how to flow, how to play the game.
Mhm.
So I think one thing that I think I found the most alarming was the hidden and truths of organizations and cultures.
Okay. No, that's a good take on it. And actually, I find that interesting because moving here I actually heard the inverse, about in Minnesota anyway. There's a term called Minnesota nice. And,
Mhm.
everybody in Minnesota is nice, but it's a fake nice. It's a lot of that. You talked about the microaggressions. It's a lot of that passive aggressive style where they really
Hmm.
don't tell you. So I find that interesting that your take is, going to the Southeast. But being from the Southeast, I do understand what you're talking about, like with the, you're not in that group. You're not in that good old boy network or
Hmm.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that. I want to change the subject a little bit and talk about your "I Like Me" initiative because the title just stands out because so many people don't like themselves, and we experience that a lot. Corporate America, personal life, you can see it on social media. So tell me a little bit about "I Like Me" and then how did that come to be?
So, I Like Me is an initiative originally developed for young adults
Hmm.
and children to deal with childhood trauma for
Okay.
childhood resiliency. So, anti bullying, being able to embrace themselves, all of those different things that they experience as children. But the truth is, as I developed it, as I, even went through, becoming a psychologist and all of those different things, it it's so much bigger, right? Like there's no sect of people or no fragment of persons that can't use that development, those same tools, because privileges happen to each category one way or the other,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it came to be because, out of my own trauma, my life. In my second book, which is my memoir, Born Out of Pain, talks
Hmm.
about that whole life of, being raised in a very strict, and I mean ultimate strict religious Pentecostal home, and
Hmm.
how I didn't fit in, and how even though I had memorized the whole Bible. I mean, I was able to, get with the
Yeah.
best of them, and I was a star church child, right? But it was the mark of and I had never accepted it or even acknowledged being a homosexual or same gender loving or
Hmm.
LGBT queer, whatever you want to call it, right? I
Yeah.
did not,
Yeah.
because of course we were taught that it was an abomination, you were going to hell.
Hmm.
So that was something that limited me and gave me great stress and all of those things. And so I experienced, going to school being bullied, being thrown downstairs,
Wow.
being jumped on, being on, all those different things where I had teachers that literally for lunch told me to come into their classroom to eat my lunch with them. So it was a protection.
Hmm.
I mean, and then go home to a brother or older brother who was just trying to toughen me up and, make a
Hmm.
man out of me. And then I had a stepfather who tried to seek the chop treatment to, do the anti-gay, and then go to a church where I loved church, but they
Hmm.
hated me, but they loved me because they could use all of my gifts because I was the soloist, I was the
Hmm.
director, I could play the drums, I could play, I had
Yeah.
all of the gifts. I could even prophesy and preach and quote the Bible, and I
Hmm.
lived holy, right? But
Hmm.
it was just that earmark of we still can't let you in because you're on the outside. And that caused, at 6 years old, an evangelist looked at me and I didn't even know what it was. She looked at me and said, "Oh, you're gay and you're going to hell." I'm
Hmm.
6 years old. I had never heard the
Oh
word
man.
gay before. So when I
Yeah.
went home to my mother and told her, because I'm glad I didn't tell her who said it, I just said, "What's
Yeah.
gay and why am I going to hell?" It started a whole long where I tried to commit suicide 3 times. One at
Ooh.
11, one at 16, and one at 18,
Mhm.
because of just that stress of trying to live something that I didn't know how. No one gave me tools. No one told me to accept me, to like me, any of those things. And so out of that
Mhm.
arose I Like Me. So it sits on the premise of being able to be self create, which is self care,
Mhm.
self respect, self esteem, self accept, self trust, and self
Mhm.
empowerment. So, and it doesn't matter who you're talking to; those principles still are applicable.
Okay, so that was really, really good and deep. I mean, you shared a lot of personal stuff there that I could see where that would be traumatic and
Hmm.
probably still would cause some issues even in adulthood. So,
Hmm.
how do
Yes.
you work with adults that are in that situation that you come across that are just, they haven't been as forward as you are, as who you are, right?
Mhm.
How do you work with them as a leader in leadership thought process?
So for me, it comes down to still that self-acceptance, that
Mm-hmm.
self-transparency. You have to be, when we talk about authenticity, and I believe Brene Brown is a very good person about being, having that ability to allow yourself to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that even in leadership, and it doesn't matter what type of trauma, where the trauma is, or because sometimes it's just that you have flaws that you just think if someone sees them, they'll think you're not worthy to be
Yeah.
in leadership, right?
Yeah.
You don't know, you kind of faked your way or sleep, got to where you are and you think imposter syndrome, all those different things.
Mm-hmm.
It still comes down to being able to accept yourself. When you have enough grace for yourself to know that, hey, I'm not good in these type of situations, or I'm dealing with this. Right now at my company, that I work, I'm on an ERG, and it causes me to have to push myself beyond where I'm comfortable, and so
Mm-hmm.
I had to first have a mentor that was able to say, hey, do what's safe for you, but understand pros and cons of all of it, and then make
Yeah.
a healthy decision. But it starts with being able to have that self emotional intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, hey, this is my trigger. This is
Mm-hmm.
what happens in these situations. What can I do to mitigate it or
Yeah.
to manage it? Or it's something I need not go into. So when you're talking about leadership, because believe it or not, we try and say that we have these different personalities. So you have a home you have a work you have a church you have an organizational you. No, you are a really one person. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't care how you may move your voice to sound a different type of way, which is code
Mm-hmm.
switching. But
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
still the person behind the code switching it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
triggers will switch you right back if you're not careful. So the first thing you need to do is actually be honest, saying, hey,
Yeah.
this is just what it is. And I get help for it, get support for it, staff it if I'm weak in that area,
Mm-hmm.
or but that sometimes I have to reconcile that with an authentic mindset.
Yeah. So I love that. And again, I'm going to change gears here just a little bit. So you've had the opportunity to work internationally in Africa. A lot of people haven't had that opportunity. So one, tell me about the experience. Like, why were you there? But then, how is that environment different than the U.S.?
So it came about last year when I released Born Out of Pain.
Hmm.
Um, my PR was actually able, and it was serendipitous, because I was looking to get on a TEDx. I wanted to, that
Hmm.
was kind of the
Yeah.
speaker's kind of roadmap that I had for myself, and they happened to be having in Johannesburg a TEDx session, and I was actually the last person they accepted into the program to be able to do it. So, and of course, it was for me, it was more than a no-brainer. It's like not
Hmm.
only do I get to be on TEDx, but I get to say I was in TEDx in South Africa. Like, who's doing that? Like, boom, right? So
Yeah.
when I got there, though, again, when it's for you or when it's your path, it will align its own self. You just have to be available, right?
Hmm.
So when I got there, I'm there talking about childhood resiliency. We went to the school and met with the Ministry of Education, had
Hmm.
great conversation with the children. It was miraculous. It was wonderful. But then I was presented as, this LGBTQ ambassador. It was an
Mm.
announcement to me too, because I'm like, no, that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about childhood, but in Botswana, um, they had they had just gotten a new president, and they had rescinded the ban for SGL, for so that the
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Yeah.
community could thrive. And so it was actually, they were like, oh my God, we could use your assistance, we can use your knowledge, with
Hmm.
all things as a psychologist, as a part of the community already. So that's how it happened. What I noticed the difference, um, is that number one, they're both more forthcoming and underhanded,
Mm.
and there's a balance of it.
Okay.
So they don't mind telling you, no, this is not going to work. Versus, don't call us, we'll call you. You have to read between those lines in the U.S.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
they're going to say, yeah, this is not going to work. I hope you have success. Maybe you can call me back if they'll tell you you're not waiting And you're not
Yeah.
trying to, but on the other side, there is a lot more bribery, a lot more,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's much more acceptable. So
Mhm.
there's ways that you have to go about it, and then learning all of the nuances, of course, of their culture. And being from America, they look at you to be advanced. They look at you to come in and already. So you have to have a shift that mindset.
So you just mentioned something interesting, and again, I'm going to take a little bit of turn off of something that you said that you didn't mention to them that, hey, I'm going to be a representative of the LGBTQ plus population, but they automatically assume that, right?
Yes.
So, and I'm trying to make this a broader conversation right here because a lot of people watching, whether you are a woman, whether you are a black man, whether you are whatever it is, a straight white male, like you don't want that attachment to be automatic. You know, when you show up, like I don't automatically want to be representing all black men when I get up to speak just because I'm a black man, right?
Hmm.
White women don't want to get up to, represent all white women when they speak because they happen to be a white woman. So, one, how often does that happen to you? But then two, like, how do you segment that part of yourself because it is part of you, but into I'm just a leader and I'm a psychologist and I'm a doctor and I'm intelligent and I have experiences beyond, this of who I am. But how often does that happen? And then how do you segment that?
So, um, wonderful question, very
Mhm,
timely, because it happens more often than not. So,
mhm,
I work in an organization as a change management consultant, senior consultant, and
mhm,
literally, it's a global company. Um, and so, I've had to do, IT implementations and all those type of things that across span the globe with
mhm.
Fortune 500 companies. So we're not talking about just mom and pop shops. We're talking about real good $10 million contracts, right?
Yeah.
Um, so with all of that work, even in my organization, we had an all hands, I happened to just thumb through all the people that was there because I was bored at what they were talking about. So I
Yeah.
just, and I was the only black male there.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about 500 to 600 people.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah, so it was an aha moment because we pride ourselves on diversity at the organization, right?
Right.
And so, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying in the business unit I was in, I was
Mhm.
the only one. Now there were other black females that was represented, but I was the only black male. Then they told me there was one, but I never saw them there, and they
Yeah.
were in Norway. So I'm not really sure why they were in our count anyway. But be it to say, even in that, I joined an ERG, Employment Resource Group, so
Mhm.
for Out Front, which is the queer community.
Mhm.
And immediately I got all of these invites to sit on these panels, to sit on these boards, to travel to
Mhm.
represent what is, I would say, 2% of who David Glover is.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
because if you think about it, if we think about it,
Yeah.
if we're going to go with whether you believe it or not, let's just talk about it, right?
Mhm.
And I'm
Yeah.
talking to the general populace. If you believe in born this way,
Mhm.
right? I was born black, male, and queer. If we're going to
Yeah.
make that right, but
Okay.
I worked hard for my education. I
Mhm.
decided what career path, and I made a choice of how I showed up. But none
Mhm.
of those things matter except for
Oh
what I
man.
had no control over.
Yeah. Yeah. This
So
is such a good conversation.
yeah, it automatically happens, and
Yeah.
assumptions are always attached with it. So I become the token. So
Mhm.
whenever they just had of course, Pride Month just happened, and
Mhm.
I mean, every week I was asked to be on a board, and you got to balance. What does that mean? Because
Right.
first of all,
Right.
I don't want to be just known as the ERG resource when I do
Yeah.
right. You're paying me for work. You're paying
Mhm.
me good six-figure money for work,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
known for what I was born with that no one is paying me.
Mhm.
But you
Oh,
have
that's
to be
good.
able to play the game and balance because at a certain time, that pours back into the value where it may be job security after a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's you know you
Wow.
it's a very I'm learning even in our culture, even on
Mhm.
corporate level, that you have to remember all of those things and
Mhm.
take advantage of all those things because I had a conversation with my people manager
Hmm.
this week. That's why I said it's very timely, because I had a conversation about this very thing
Yeah.
this week, because I said I need to start having do more sessions that feature other parts of me.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I did was the intersectionality. So it was about me being black and gay.
Yeah.
And I've been gay so long in all these sessions that when I saw the flyer, I had forgot I was black until I realized, oh,
Wow.
that's why I'm here, because I'm both gay and black.
Wow.
Because people will put you
Hmm.
to one set till you forget all of who you are. And as a leader, you have to be able to know that just because you do have a strength or something that
Hmm.
is featured, I am still a holistic person. And in order that I be balanced and not burnt out, even in that area that I'm shining right now,
Hmm.
I need to consider how do I balance that? How do I equate that so that you may need me for this, but understand you also get this. So I'm gonna add value to all of it,
Hmm.
using all of it, if that makes sense. And it
No,
becomes a
that
conundrum,
does.
but it comes at work. But you're graced for it. If
Yeah.
you do have the capability and you do possess it, that also means you have, and you may need support. You may need a mentor. You may need some development. You may need to go see psychologists
Hmm.
just to make sure that your mind is decluttered, that you can still think straight, that you don't lose yourself in that.
So I guarantee you this conversation is going to help a lot of people, whether, they're homosexual, identify, whatever it is. I guarantee you this conversation is going to help a lot of people. So I appreciate your transparency. And then I'm going to go into my next topic of conversation for you. And so your books, you hinted a little bit about them, but I'm sure people are curious, if you can give us just a little peek into each book, like one, what inspired you to write it,
Okay.
what's it about, and then what can people get out of that?
Okay, so the first book, which is the one that you read in the bio, is actually, it arises out of my scholarly work. It's out of my
Hmm.
master's program for industrial organizational psychology. So it's really about how to be a good leader. That's my leadership book. That's the book where it
Yeah.
teaches you about emotional intelligence. It teaches you how to build and sustain, maintain a team. It's the book that I actually have a YouTube channel about as well, about
Hmm.
leadership, all things leadership. So diversity, how to make sure you're being inclusive leader, a transformational leader, servant leader, all those different type of leadership skills. How to facilitate, and navigate groups, diverse groups, how to work asynchronous, because we're all
Hmm.
still figuring out. We're all kind of fatigued off of teams, but we're all still zooming and teaming, but how do we keep everybody engaged? How do we make sure that we're maximizing the potential and pouring into our subordinates or our leaders, or even leading from behind? Maybe you're not a leader, maybe,
Hmm.
but you can still actually lead from wherever you're seated, right? So being able to aspire all those different things is in that book. So that's that book.
Like
The
it.
second
Okay.
book, Born Out of Pain, which is my memoir. That book was actually not even written to be a book. It actually, when I moved from Milwaukee to Atlanta, I didn't have any. I was here for school, so I didn't
Hmm.
have church. I didn't have family. I didn't have any distractions. It opened up a wealth of freedom, but with that freedom, opened up Pandora's box. So all those things that have been suppressed started
Hmm.
coming up. I started going on walks because I love to walk. So I would walk, and I was by a park. So I would walk around the park, come back home, and that would be therapeutic for me. Well,
Yeah.
what happened? A memory was surfaced. And so then I started having panic attacks at night.
Ooh.
Well, I didn't have insurance, didn't have money to go, see therapists or anything. But the only thing I did know to do is I can write it out. I can get it out by writing. So literally, though the book is very episodic. It's not like at 4 years old, this, at 5 years old.
Yeah.
So it's not basic like that. So, but it comes in spurts as I had the memory. So all these traumas that came um, and woke me up at night, I went to my computer and I would start typing it. Well, sometimes I'll only be able to type 3 or 4 words and I would just lose it crying. But I was
Mhm.
releasing it. Well, at the end of probably a year of doing that, because it was a long process, um, I had the skeleton of a book. And it was told to me, and I was told years and years ago that I was going to write that book. I cussed them out because I hated writing at that point. I'm like, I do not write. I sing, I
Yeah.
act, I draw, I do anything but write. I do not like, I speak. I love to speak. So
Yeah.
if it was words, and back then we didn't have words to, text
Yeah.
where we could do it that way. But so it really came from that, those blogs, if you will, of just getting it out. And then it narrated its own self. And then, of course, you come and massage it, make sure that
Mhm.
so that's how that book came. And to be honest, the between the two books, obviously you would know that the second book means more to me, right? Because it
Yeah.
is me
Yeah.
in the book. But what I tell you, Matt, has been the most profound thing. Because, of course, I know my life, right?
Mhm.
But you never know somebody else reading your life, what they take away from it, right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
they see, how resilient they believe you are just from reading your book. Now, mind you, I have had very close friends that call themselves my brother and sister, right?
Mhm.
And they were like, I had no idea.
Mhm.
I could not have imagined. So it's like,
Mhm.
and actually it answers a lot of questions, right? So I
Yeah.
had all of that. But the most unique thing is because I believe the book and those who could relate to it the easiest will be those who are like me, right?
Mhm.
But my like me is my own interpretation of who's like
I
me.
love that. That's why I like the title. That's why I like the
Yeah.
title.
I literally, the people that first started reacting and were cisgendered female heterosexual women. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, this story does not compute with you. Like, so, but of course, as a psychologist, it's like, now wait a minute, how did this happen? Tell me more. And of course, I use my fallacy because I want to pull out everything, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to really understand how the hell did this happen? Hopefully that's all right, you bleep it. But how did it happen that this means that much to you versus who I know I believe it should mean to? And so after the fourth or fifth one,
Mhm.
I saw the pattern. And I saw that this is bigger than you. This is more than you. You thought you were going just for one niche and going for one specific, area, but it's bigger because we are more alike than we are different.
That is so good and so true. And that's why earlier when you were speaking, I was like, this is going to help a whole lot of people, this conversation. It doesn't matter. Like your story is about struggle, period. And so people can relate to struggle, whatever the struggle is. There could be some rich, privileged person growing up, but didn't have the love of their parents. And for them, that was a struggle, right?
Yeah,
We don't
absolutely.
think they struggled. And I guarantee there's some things in your life or in your book that you talk about that they can relate to. So again, appreciate your transparency. So, one last question before the last question.
Okay.
So, what is your passion? Like, if someone were well, I am asking you, what is your passion? It could be in life, it could be work, something you want to accomplish. But what is your passion?
My passion is simply empowerment, right?
Okay.
Um, to bring it a little bit more specific, it would be I love to see the underprivileged abound. I love giving you tools. It's why I was in education first, why I love training first, why I love consulting. Because I want to pull, even as a psychologist, they tell you that your job is not to give anybody answers because we believe on the back,
Hmm.
drop of us, that you are already with the answer. We just need to ask those probing questions that makes it arise, that piques your interest into your own self to get that answer out. So that's empowerment. You
Hmm.
know, I use I this happened to me years ago. As I said before, I was born Pentecostal. So in one of these many revivals we had to be in, one of the revivals came to me and she laid her hands on me and she said, "You are a healer. You are a healer." Now, because of the fact that in my little mind, I was
Hmm.
7 or 8 years old. In my little mind, a healer is a person that somebody is sick. You got
Hmm.
cancer, you have diabetes, you have. I'm going to be able to speak to that or pray or whatever that is, and the manifestation of that is that you're made whole. That the old school church talked about how they came in on
Yeah.
crutches and walked
Yeah.
back out,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
cancer dried up, or tumors, they went to the bathroom and passed, tumors and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So when that stuff was not happening, I couldn't understand what did she mean by healer. But
Mhm.
all along, because my frame was wrong,
Mhm.
I was a mental healer. I was one that was able to come in and nurture and heal you from traumatic oppression that sometimes you inflicted on yourself or allowed that
Yeah. Yeah.
affliction. Right. So I think for me, it's the empowerment, it's the dismantling of your self deprivation and empowering you to be the best you, whether that's in at work, which is what I still do as consulting, right?
Mhm.
Or whether I do it in I Like Me, which is obviously kind of apparent, or whether I'm doing it in leadership training.
Okay. All right. Empowerment as a passion. And I have that as a passion as well, but it's a little bit different than what you explained, but I won't get into it now. We'll talk later. But now I got to
Okay.
go into my staple question I ask all the good people that come on to the My Great Aunt Edna Leadership Podcast. And the question is, Dr. David Glover, what one or two things just pisses you off as a leader in today's environment that you wish you could change?
The first thing, and I guess it blends right over, is inauthenticity. Why
Mhm.
are you here and you're not going to give me the real you?
Yeah.
The cookie cutter. You won't. You have no. Even so now. Ooh, Trump,
Yeah, yeah,
as I'm not a supporter. I am not a fan. But
yeah.
what I do respect is his authenticity. He is going to
Mhm.
tell you what he has to say.
Yes.
And whether you like it, don't like it, stand there, take it, leave, do what you need to do. But this is what it is. I can
Mhm,
respect you when I know you. But
mhm.
if you're shifty, you don't know what you're, and we all have ebbs and flows. I get it, I
Yeah,
get it. And
yeah,
sometimes we
yeah.
gotta play a game and sometimes we gotta play a role. I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about someone who is jelly backed, as they used to call it. Right?
Mhm.
You don't have any, you can't do nothing, you can't stand up for nothing. Like, no, I don't get it. That probably is one and two. I don't know how we
Mhm.
split them, but that could be one and two. Um, I can leave it there because I think
That's
that's
it?
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
unauthenticity.
Yeah,
Fake people, the people that are playing the game don't show you the real face,
yeah.
just pisses you off, and I can relate to that because there are a lot of people that do that.
Mhm.
Um, I'll just leave it at that as well because I can say a lot. I can say a lot, but I'll stop right there. All right. So before we go today, if you could tell us how we can get your books, and then how can people get in contact with you, whether they need some of your counseling, they want you as a speaker, a representative, how do we get in touch with you?
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity. Simply all of that you can find on my website, which is drdavidnglover.com. Again, that's drdavidnglover.com. No periods, nothing fancy, just all the way through, drdavidnglover.com.
Got it. That's easy enough. All right. So everyone out there, drdavidnglover.com, go check it out. We're also going to put the information up on the screen for those of you who are watching via our YouTube channel as well. And so, Dr. Glover, I want to thank you for joining the show today. This has been a great conversation. As I
Absolutely.
mentioned, before we actually started rolling, I love people that are authentic on the show, and that's what I'm looking for. Just tell me the
Absolutely.
real deal. You did
Absolutely.
exactly that. I was intrigued by the conversation, and so I'm sure there'll be others out there. You guys make sure you reach out to them. And for the viewers out there, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have audio podcasts on all the major podcasts out there and YouTube as well. And so, with that, I say thank you. May your week be excellent, and God bless.
God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of My Great Aunt Edna, featuring Dr. David N. Glover. He's a best-selling author and motivational speaker, and his information is up on the screen right now. You can reach him at www.drdavidnglover.net. And also, I'd like to remind you that my book is available called My Great Aunt Edna, The Golden Girl of Leadership, available wherever books are sold. And like and subscribe to this channel so that you can hear from other great leaders from all over the world to help you in your own leadership journey. And with that, I say thank you. May your week be excellent, and God bless.